Everyone's out there making really cute holiday scenes and Santa and Christmas trees and gifts, and I'm making a creepy Oscar the Grouch. So, welcome to Bentley House Minis. In a previous live stream, I started a prompt called Bad Dream, and I wanted to finish it before the end of the year. Since this is my last video of 2022, it's time to go ahead and complete my bad dream. In the live stream, I explained to everyone a common bad dream I had as a child. So my dream would always start that I'd be riding in the van with our family. We always were like in a van. And then all of a sudden the van would pull over like right outside these dumpsters. And there'd just be dumpsters on one side. Everyone in my family would jump out of the van and just bolt in all directions, except for me, because I didn't know what was going on. And I would just be like sitting in the van. And then all of a sudden the van door, like the sliding door, would just slide open like super loud and the van would shake. And it was Big Bird. Big Bird had opened the van door and he had bright red eyes. And he would reach in and he would grab my legs or grab some part of me and just start pulling me out of the van towards the dumpster. And who was in the dumpster? Oscar the Grouch, also with red eyes. After that, I started needle felting the Oscar the Grouch. And this was about where I ended up at the end of that live stream. So I'm gonna go ahead and edit down that footage really quickly so you can see the process of how I got to this point. I began by creating a pipe cleaner skeleton that was going to go on the inside of Oscar. I had to make sure and get those arms correct. Muppets always have those big, long, floppy arms. Then I could start building up the head. I just started with some regular interior wool that I didn't think you would really see in the end, but I was going to use a reverse needle in this project for the first time that pulls wool out because Oscar the Grouch is pretty fuzzy. And then in the chat they mentioned, well, if it's going to pull out the wool from the inside, doesn't it also need to be green? So then I started using the green wool for the inside of Oscar as well. If you can't tell, I'm still learning about needle felting. I'm just kind of doing experiments as I go along. So I wouldn't take anything I do with needle felting as a tutorial quite yet. After getting the body built up and all the pipe cleaners covered with the green wool, I moved on to the arms, which just consisted of wrapping wool around the pipe cleaners and needle felting it in place. This is slowly building into a creature, which I'm sure looks more recognizable than the pipe cleaner skeleton I had at the beginning. And then of course I needed to test him in the box that at the time I was thinking I would use as a dumpster. After I had gotten somewhat of a shape, I decided to try the reverse needle, and this is going to be pulling some of the wool out, which I was hoping would make the fur texture. I got it immediately stuck into the wool, and when I pulled it out, it pulled a lot of the interior out, and you could see one little tiny wisp of wool. And so I decided this may not be the best application for this needle, but I'm going to keep it and try it for something else later. I think I'm just going to have to lay down Oscar's fur one weft at a time. And I finished the stream by adding some black wool to create his mouth. So now that I'm at this point, I want to continue to work on my needle felted Oscar. I want to make him a lot more creepy, have little drips of the fur coming off, and he definitely has to have red eyes, of course. In the live stream, I was working with this box, thinking I could make it look like the dumpster. However, to make this more holiday filled, I have this holiday can of Pringles that I finished. And Oscar is just way more associated with a trash can than with a dumpster. And so I'm really tempted to use this Pringles can as a trash can and kind of bypass the dumpster idea. Doesn't really matter what trash receptacle you're in. If you're a Muppet with red eyes, I think that's just gonna do the job. So let's get started. I guess this is really more of a winter-themed Pringles can, but either way, it's going to work. I held Oscar up to the side, marked out how deep I thought it should be, and used a piece of paper wrapped around it to try and make a straight line that I could cut along. I am going to end up painting it, so I went ahead and sanded the sides. This is how he looks once he's inside of the can, and I think it's a pretty good size. To fill up the can, I'm using some paper from my scrap pile, and I'm just going to place it in the bottom. This is going to fill up the area since he's just kind of one half of a body so far. Back to creating Oscar, I wanted to figure out how I was going to make his eyes. His eyes are a really prominent feature of the Bad Dream, so I wanted to make sure I got them right. In my collection of beads, I found these red transparent pony beads, and they're not quite big enough to be the entire eyeball, but I think they are big enough to be the pupil, and because they're transparent, I think it's going to be a really cool look against all of the wool. So to make the eye a little bit bigger, I'm going to lay down a circle of white wool that's going to be the area of the eye, and then the red bead is going to go into the center. There is a little bit of green fur in between Oscar's eyes, so I'm trying to make sure I space them out according to his character design. Once that's laid down, I can start to install the pony beads. I'm going to put each pony bead on a length of embroidery thread, and I'm going to thread it through his body. I'm using a doll needle for this. I got the doll needle in a previous needle felting kit, and it's going to be really useful for this project. I threaded the string through the needle, then went through the very center of the eye. This is going to look painful for a second. Tried to make sure I went straight through the body so it came out the end of Oscar's body, and then I could pull it all the way through. Now we have some red with our green, so I hope you're feeling the Christmas spirit already. I made a knot so the string could not come back out through his body, and now the pony bead is in place. I did this for both eyes and started to think, oh no, he's really looking like a tree frog. Which tree frogs are great, they're cute, however I'm not going for cute or for tree frog, so I'm hoping I can spook it up a little bit. Now that the pony beads were knotted in place, I'm going to use some white wool to go through the pony bead and then felt that into the eyes as well. This is going to make the eyes a little bit more round, give them some more volume in the white areas, and it's going to be a double secure way to keep the pony beads in place. I think this makes the entire wool and bead look like one eyeball. Once those were done, those pony beads were not going anywhere, and I was pretty happy with the eyes. Oscar does have a pretty prominent brow with eyebrows, so I had to build up his forehead just a little bit more. I'm adding some more green wool to do that. He still was very much not looking like Oscar the Grouch to me, but I realized his eyebrows are a pretty important feature of his face and his design. So I'm hoping by adding in some of this brown wool, he's really going to start to look like himself. I'm adding this along the brow that I just created and trying to stick it in place. I don't want it to be too flat. I do want it to be pretty fluffy. I want his eyebrows to be pretty big. And then I realized I was quickly running out of green fur and I wanted to conserve it, so I'm using some of the brown wool to go around the hands, and then later when I add some of the wefts, it will cover up the brown. But I do think those two colors work pretty well together. It was difficult to get the brown wool over the pipe cleaners, and there's still some areas where you can see pipe cleaner showing through, but I'm pretty happy with the shape of his hands. I also added some more to the sides of his face because his head is kind of a football shape. I also added some brown to his back to give him a hunched look because I think it gives more of the appearance that he's trying to lunge forward and grab whatever's in front of him. I continued to add more brown wool wherever I felt like I needed to fill out his face or make him look more accurate to his original design. This is not terrifying at all. It's actually kind of cute. He looks more sad than scary. In my research, I saw this photo of Oscar the Grouch where he has his trash can on and you can see his little feet sticking out. I don't know. This isn't my original Bad Dream, but like I do want it to seem like a bad dream. And now I have in my head that I want to make like these spider legs coming out of the trash can, like the legs busted out of the side of the trash can, and like he's like, I'm coming to get you. So yes, I'm making more work for myself, but I think you'd definitely be more terrifying that way. is very different than the original project that I thought I was going to be making, but I think it might be more along the line of the prompt, more of a bad dream of something I would have nowadays, something with spider legs coming after me. Now that the trash can is going to become more of like a spider body to him, and I think you might see more of his body like coming out, I guess I kind of figure it'll look more like a hermit crab where sometimes you see more of his body coming out of the shell. Anyway, obviously I have no idea what I'm making anymore. I'm just going for it. I'm adding some more of his body onto the back, and then I'm covering him with the brown wool. The obvious thing that's going to make this look more scary is some teeth. And now that he is a spider Oscar the Grouch, he's going to have two fangs coming out of the front, and I'm using toothpicks for this. They are a little bit difficult to get through the needle felted wool. However, if I move them back and forth, I am able to get them through, and it's pretty easy to place them, and then if I don't like them, I can just pull them back out. So while they're in place, I pulled them a little longer than I want them to be, and I can just paint them with acrylic. This is a pretty easy way to hold it. I just have to make sure I don't get any paint on the wool. Once the paint is dry, I'm going to add some tacky glue, and then I can pull the toothpicks back up through the head, and the tacky glue is going to go inside of the head, holding the toothpicks in place. This is a great, easy way to add some teeth to my monster, and yeah, it worked pretty good. Once the glue was dry and the toothpicks were being held in place, I could squish the head down a little bit and cut the toothpicks as close to the top as possible. And then once the head kind of bounced back, you could no longer see the tops of the toothpicks, and I had two fangs that were securely held in place. This next step is going to be what I hope adds a lot of his Muppet character, which is going to be a lot of fluff. I realized while editing that you can't really see what I'm doing with my hand in the way, so a little bit later down the line I will show you this process. But basically I add a weft of fur across his back, needle felt down the center, kind of like a part, and then I pull it to one side and needle felt on either side. Then I can take a pair of scissors and make the fur a little more uneven. I don't want him to look too groomed. That wouldn't be right for his character. And this is how it's looking once it's installed. Again, I will show you how I did that a little closer up down the line. I'm going to speed through this process because it does take quite a while, and again, it's hard to show with my hand in the way, but when I get to the smaller areas like the arms and around the head, I do this same process but just in smaller bits as I go around the difficult areas. I did most of his body while I was sitting at my desk, which is why I'm showing you the progress, but then I worked at his head while I was enjoying a show sitting in my bed, so that's why you don't see much of that. But it's the same process, and this is how it looked. I'm so happy I extended his cheeks to give him more of that football-shaped head, and then I also added more to his eyebrows, making sure they come down to a point in between the eyes. I did not get to the hands yet, which you can see the final product here. I just draped the wool over his fingers and then needle felted it into his wrists. Here's the example I was talking about earlier where I will show you the process. I maybe picked an awkward spot, but I'm going to show it to you here on his rear end. I just laid down a piece of wool across the back, and then I made a line of needle felting down the center so it does look like a part in the fur. Then I'm going to pull it over to one side and use the same needle to go over the very edge of this piece. And that's just going to help hold it down a little bit better, and I'm not just relying on that center felting. I'm going to pull it the other way and do the exact same thing on the other side. I don't know if this is the correct way to do this, but I did find that it held really well, and I wasn't worried about any of it coming out after, like, just being pulled on. I felt like it was pretty secure. Now that the bulk of his body is finished, I can focus on the trash can. I'm going to be using bits of paper to make a little bit of detail. This is just a strip of cardstock that I'm wrapping around the upper rim. I also want to add two handles on either side, so I'm making a U shape, which is where the handle is going to exist. And it does kind of look like I'm giving the snowman a tiny pocket, which I thought was really cute. And then I also made the handle out of cardstock, which I just forced into the shape of a handle. It is double thick, and I added glue in between, so it should be pretty strong. After all the glue was dry, I could rough up the can a little bit. I don't want this to look too shiny and new, so I had to put quite a few dents in it, and using these pliers helped a lot because the Pringles can was pretty strong. I found that my favorite technique was turning the pliers and making these really long dents in the top. I also needed to mess up the bottom of the Pringles can. It was too straight. So I used this wooden mallet on the floor because I didn't want to shake the camera too much, and this was how I messed up the bottom, which I think looks a lot better when it comes to Oscar the Grouch's trash can. Of course, I need to cover everything in a layer of Mod Podge. This is mixed with black acrylic paint, so I have a good base to start with when I begin to paint it. After that's completely dry, I'm putting a layer of antique copper. This is because I don't have enough silver paint to cover everything, and I thought the copper would give it a nice variation in the color of metallic paint. I do have a little bit of silver, which is what the color of the trash can needs to be, so I just brushed that on top of the antique copper, and I think the effect worked, but I do need to get some more silver paint. I think it looks okay. Of course, I need to age the trash can. I'm making sure to take some black paint and pull the paint down from the top of the can, like many years of things spilling over the edges has left its mark. Here's how Oscar is looking in the trash can, and now that I see him in this pose, I do think making him into some kind of spider is going to be the best call because he's just looking straight up. He's not looking out, he's looking straight up into the sky. So by putting him in a forward-facing position, I think it makes more sense. I'm using these barbecue skewers to be the structure for his legs. I glued them together with some hot glue, and then I'm adding more hot glue with a bit of string that I'm going to tie around the joint. This is going to make the joint so much stronger than just using hot glue by itself. Once that dries, I can clip off the excess pieces from the barbecue skewers, and now I have the skeleton for a spider leg. I'm going to be using 6 of these, even though spiders have 8 legs. He does have 2 arms in the front, so I think it works out in the end. I knew that needle felting along the length of each leg was going to be a long process and very tiring, so I decided to wrap the long part of the legs with some brown rope, and this is going to keep that part of the leg very skinny. It's going to strengthen the barbecue skewer, and it's going to keep me from having to needle felt the whole thing. So that's the idea behind what I was doing there. And then I am going to needle felt over the kneecap area and then also the foot. And this is going to make it look more like the spidery leg. I'm hoping it's going to give it that kind of fluffy look. And then the rest of it will stay spindly and skinny. It was pretty difficult felting around a barbecue skewer. I did not enjoy it very much at all because I kept hitting the skewer that was inside, but I did eventually get it done. I just kept turning it around and felting more at an angle than straight into the piece. Once I had those 2 areas felted with brown, I went back with some of the green that's on his body, so these pieces do look like they are part of Oscar's character. If they didn't have the green, I don't know if it would really come across that it wasn't just random legs coming out of a trash can. So this is how they look once I felted along the kneecap. It's kind of like a knee mohawk, and then there's a little tuft of fur on the foot as well. I made 2 of these for the front of the trash can, and at that point I decided I needed to go ahead and install Oscar so I knew how this was going to look once it started coming together. I'm using some hot glue, and as you can see, that paper is inside the middle of it, which is going to help me glue him in place. Gluing the legs to the side of him was no easy feat because I had to avoid getting hot glue on the fur because it would be almost impossible to get it back off. But once this was done, I noticed they were kind of wobbly, and that's because there's a lot of space within the trash can itself. So at this point, I needed to stuff it with trash. Oscar the Grouch lives in trash, loves trash, so I needed to add that part as well. So I added it all along the sides and then in the back, and this really started to tighten up the area where the legs were so they weren't wobbling so much. I also added a little trash bag to the back. Of course, he's got to have some kind of plastics in there as well. I really love this detail because it's pretty easy to mess these types of bags up with the end of a hot glue gun because they are plastic, and then they really do look ripped up like they've been in that trash can for a while. After that was all set, I could start working out the other legs. I put a 1, 2, 3 block under the back end of the trash can so that he was lifted up off the mat, and that way I could really get the legs in place so that we're holding him up. I used a Sharpie to mark where I thought the legs needed to be, and then I started cutting into the can. Then I could put him back onto the 1, 2, 3 block and test that these were going to be good spaces for the legs. I went around the edges with a little bit more Mod Podge and black acrylic paint so that these areas looked worn and also it would protect the edges. Then I completed the rest of the legs, which I sped through so you don't have to see. It did take like almost a whole day to get all of these legs done. And then I could add them one at a time by filling the area with hot glue and adding the leg in place and holding it there until it had cooled off. The 1, 2, 3 blocks helped me keep those legs in place. Even though I was using hot glue, because it was enclosed within the trash can, it was taking a long time for the glue to cool, and I didn't want those legs to spread apart while I was waiting for that. Finally, it was time to age the trash in the trash can. I gave it a nice green hue to match Oscar's fur tone, and that was pretty much the final part of the project. So that's what I created for the prompt Bad Dream. Definitely different from my original Bad Dream, but I do think it's still fairly terrifying and I definitely wouldn't want it coming after me. To keep in the holiday spirit, I made a little Santa hat for Oscar the Grouch. I thought that would be cute. And then I also added Aira riding off into the distance with Oscar, off to tell all the boys and girls to keep their packaging from all their toys so in the future they can make a cardboard dollhouse. So it all works out in the end. Well, this project really got away from me there. This is not what I expected to be making when I started this whole thing. And also, my camera has decided to go on vacation a little bit early, so I'm filming this last part of the video on my phone. It just couldn't wait. It was tired, I guess. Now we can take a look at some of the past prompts that have been sent in, and also some people have already finished the Bad Dream prompt. Sue made this crypt door opening. You can see 2 little hands and a foot sticking out. Definitely Bad Dream material. Willenrow Arts made her own Bad Dream from when she was a child, and there's a link to her video over her creation in the description box below. Charlotte's prompt for Hideout is actually a piece of furniture with a place to hide things. And Jillian's Hideout prompt was for a wizard professor's cat who needed to hide away from the noisy students. If you would like to participate in the prompt, or you have thought you sent me a prompt and you haven't seen it here, you can send it through the Google form that's going to be in the description box below. It's been really hard in the past for me to keep up where the prompts are showing up, whether it's on Instagram or Facebook or in my email, and the Google form that's linked down there is going to help me keep track of it all. So if you do work on the prompt, make sure that is the way that you send it to me. This is going to be my last video for 2022. I'm so excited for 2023. I already know what my first video is going to be, and I've already kind of started working on it in the background. But I am going to be taking a break. I hope you have a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and just a wonderful end of your year. I hope you get to spend time with family and have a little bit of downtime relaxing. Thank you so much for your support throughout the year. Big thank you to my patrons for your extra support over there. And I'm just so thankful for this community as a whole. I hope you all have an amazing few weeks, and I will see you in the next one. Bye. Everything's trying to go wrong at the end of this video. The camera's not working. Edit, edit, edit. Cut, cut, cut. I found a chalk marker to mark off another prompt thing, and the chalk marker's not working, so. The chiller came on for the laser. Hold on a second. It'll chill out in a minute. I think everything's just ready for a little time off, including me and the chalk marker and the camera.